All right, thanks, and welcome to the annual Ascend Founders Panel. This has become one of my favorite sessions at Ascend because it's about what really happens behind the headlines. Not just the big funding rounds or the glossy press releases, but the messy, the difficult, the hard journey of actually building space companies that will go on to change the industry and the world. I'm Joe Landon. I'm the co-founder of Rendezvous Robotics. I'm an active angel investor in the space sector and a member of the Ascend Guiding Coalition. And over the years, I've been fortunate to help build several space companies myself. I was the co-founder of Space Angels, an early hire at Planetary Resources, and the co-founder of Crescent Space. Through all of that, I've lived through my own founding stories and journey, the late nights, the doubts, the moments of joy when something finally clicks into place. So one of my mentors once told me the thing about startups is the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And they also come in quick succession. So one morning you might be thinking, gosh, this is a terrible idea, it's never gonna work. But by afternoon you get news and it's the best day ever. So that's one view of how running and building a startup could be. So I'm moderating today, but I do consider myself more like a fellow traveler here with the great speakers we have. I think 90% of startups fail. And the other 10% of the time, they feel like they're failing some of the time. So we'll get into some of these struggles. But we're also going to talk about the good, the rewarding and exciting parts about building a new company. And the people on stage today with me are the ones who stepped up, knowing how hard it would be. They believed in a vision big enough, a mission important enough to risk it all, to build something new, to build something better. And that mindset is what moves our industry forward. So you're going to hear some real stories from leading founders about what it takes to build in this uniquely difficult industry, competing with billion-dollar incumbents, navigating complex government processes, and still somehow moving fast enough to compete and win. So we structured this as a conversation, and I want you to invite you to be part of it too. So on the screen and on the tables, there are QR codes, and you can submit your questions during the session. And I'll be able to see those on the screen up here, and we'll be weaving those into the conversation. So get your questions in early, and you can also vote for other people's questions if you like what they asked. So with that, let's meet our panelists. First, we have Austin Link, who is the co-founder of Starfish Space, where he and his team are developing orbital servicing technologies. He and his co-founder started the company after working at Blue Origin. Next, we have Laura Crabtree, CEO and co-founder of Epsilon 3. Company that streamlines mission operations with modern software tools, started this company after being a key member of the operations team at SpaceX. Matt Galich is the CEO and co-founder of Astroforge, which is mining asteroids to develop resources in space, a mission that is very near and dear to my heart, having spent a lot of time and energy at Planetary Resources. And then finally, Andrew Rush, the president and CEO of Starcatcher, building the first energy grid in space, and also previously, of course, founded and led Made in Space and helped to set up and scale Redwire. And as you can tell, this group is an exciting group of founders who has taken some of the most ambitious and toughest challenges on in the space industry. And while that journey is full of obstacles, it's also full of moments that make it really worth it and make it rewarding. So we'll start there. And I'll go down the line for each of you, starting with Austin. Like, what inspired you to start your company, and what was the problem you set out to solve?
That's a broad question. I'll say, despite going to school in the Bay Area in the iPhone era, I never thought I would start a company. I just kind of thought, I'm working on ambitious things in the space industry. I want to do big projects. It's going to take big companies. I'm not going to start it. A few years ago, I went to a space symposium, and I saw a number of companies being founded, not just by people who were previously really wealthy, but by people that were engineers or salespeople who had an idea and wanted to start a company and had the ability to get some money to support the company one way or another. And I saw that they had a huge lever arm on the impact that they could have on how people go out into space. And I said, I want that same lever arm. I want a chance to try to make a big difference, and we at least have that chance right now.
Cool. For me, when I left SpaceX in 2020, I sort of thought, hey, I'm going to go join a startup, and I'm going to go and join a new mission and really make an impact at a smaller company again. When I was at SpaceX, we went from 600 something people to like 6,000 or 7,000. I can't remember the exact number. It was when I left, and I wanted to get back to that small company feeling. But with all the companies that I interviewed for, I was hearing the same thing. Can we build software? And I had built some software at SpaceX for solving other problems, and every company I talked to had a very similar problem in testing and operations. And I had a lot of unique experience in that, because that's what I did at SpaceX, was mostly mission operations, as Joe alluded to. And I thought, hey, I could solve this problem for all these people that I've already talked to. And that's what I did. I like Austin, I never thought I would start a company. I'm an engineer through and through, and here I am learning how to run a business. And as we're building it, I'm learning how to run it, which is pretty fun. But yeah, I never really thought I would, and here I am 5 years later. It's pretty awesome.
I guess I'll speak for myself and not for the rest of the panelists. I think to start a company like this, you got to be kind of dumb.
Crazy.
Or crazy, or a little bit of both. Like, starting a company is actually not something that I defaulted to either. I was working on a rocket that was dropped off the wing of a 747 at Virgin Galactic. It was an awesome project to go work on. You got to do all this really cool engineering. And we got to a point where we went into manufacturing of this rocket, and oh my God, it killed the dream for me. I could care less about manufacturing and volume. I wanted to figure out if like a liquid-fueled rocket could fly to space, right? Like, that was the cool shit. And so when I left that company, JPL tried really hard to recruit me to work on a mission called Europa Clipper. This is a mission that was going to take a number of years to go out and explore a moon, and it was a really cool project to go see. And I went to JPL, and you could see parts of it and things being built of this. And then I looked at the budget and realized, holy shit, this thing costs $5.5 billion? Like, how? How do you even make the numbers add up that big, right? And what you realize is it's a huge government jobs program. That's essentially what it is at the end of the day. And so I had the completely idiotic thought of, could I make a commercial JPL? And if you could, how cheap could you actually make spacecraft? And then if you could make cheap spacecraft, what could you go do with them? And honestly, reading about what Joe had done in the past at Planetary Resources and another company called Deep Space Industries, and really understanding, like, hold on, if there's no economic limitation to mining asteroid, can we take another shot at doing it? That's all went through my head. And then you had to do the whole trick of like, cool, now you got to convince other people that you're just kind of stupid and not completely idiotic, and they got to give you money. And once you did that, it was off to the races, and here we are today.
Andrew, you've done it multiple times now.
Yeah, I think my personal and professional ambitions are really closely aligned. I essentially want to enable people to do new stuff in space and do more in space. And the previous companies that I've had the privilege of being involved with, or leading, or scaling, or founding, have been in that vein. And when we started Starcatcher, we kind of said, okay, well, what's the logical continuation of that? And ultimately, like, our vision is to make it as easy to build in space, to operate in space, as it is on the ground. And the key thing there is infrastructure. On the planet, anywhere that we settle or commercialize or industrialize, there's basically three pieces of core infrastructure. There's roads, there's power plants, and there's comms. Now in space, I think it's the same thing, except our roads are rockets, and our comm systems are like dishes or ISAs to talk back and forth, and there are plenty of people doing both those things. But there isn't really infrastructure from a power perspective. Everybody goes on these little camping trips to space, and we view that as a really big bottleneck to enabling people to do new things in space, enabling people to do more in space. But yeah, to Matt's point, you do kind of have to be a little bit crazy and a little bit intentionally myopic to go and pursue these things. There are much easier ways to have a life that's than founding a startup, a space startup.
So let's, go
Can I
ahead.
jump in on something Matt said? It's a dangerous phrase to say. But you touched on something directly that I think was actually a big part of me founding a company, and I suspect a big part of a lot of people founding companies, which is that there's a lot of really cool things going on in the space industry right now, but oh my God, they cost a lot of money and they take forever. And the sort of engineer in you goes like, if only I had this one key piece of technology, I could solve the problem and the rocket would fly, and then in practice you're building the rocket, and the problem is not that you need this key piece of technology, it's going to take 3 times as long and billions of dollars more than it's supposed to. I think that that's an important part of why I chose to found Starfish Space. I suspect that sits in a lot of the founders' heads is not just, oh, I want to bring this market to this product to bear, but at times looking at some things that are really unhealthy in our industry and seeing, boy, could we get a lot more done with the effort and the brain power that we put into it. That doesn't mean that we're going to succeed, but I think it's really valuable to have a bunch of different people taking a stab.
So let's stay on this theme of what it takes to get started. And I'm going to pull in a question from the audience about how do you, what are the first steps? And one of the first things you have to do, is to attract people and convince lots of people that your idea is a good idea. And one way to think about a startup is that it's a thesis or a hypothesis, right? And then you have lots and lots of assumptions. On day one, everything is an assumption, and you have to run experiments to turn those assumptions into facts. And like that, could be difficult to convince someone to join your team or to invest in your company if you actually don't know any of these answers to any of the questions. You have a lot of questions, but you don't know the answers. How do you think about that, first, convincing of people, whether it's an employee or co-founder or an investor, without much information? How do you approach that?
So I can start. The first thing I did when we had the idea of Starcatcher was just start calling people. I called CEOs, COOs, friends at other space companies, and just said, hey, I had this idea, space-to-space power beaming, and here's some use cases, and I think these are probably relevant to you. Tell me this is crazy. And it was really rewarding and encouraging that, of the dozen or so folks that we first called, every single one of them except one said, this is great, and here's other use cases that you should go think about and go explore. There was this one tech fellow at a prime that was very negative about it, and then I talked to another tech fellow at his company and said, well, the reason that guy's negative about it is he views it as competitive to something he's working on. It's like, oh, okay, that's good context. But first getting that social proof, and then taking that social proof, and then and then just keeping layering on top of that more and more and more, and then using that to convince people to join the cause, convince investors to join the cause, convince early customers to join the cause. I think that's the foundation that you have to build on, is actual go-to-market, actual product in service fit.
Laura?
Yeah, I think the first thing, after I Googled how do you start a company, literally it happened. And then somebody said, are you raising a seed round? And I Googled that too, and I didn't know anything. But after that, everything is about sales. You're selling yourself, you're selling your product, you're selling your company to people to join, and you have to learn how to exude passion and that you at least kind of know what's going on, or that you'll figure it out. And you have to get people to believe in you, get people to believe in what you're building. And it really starts with personal conviction. After you've developed personal conviction and you've gone out and you know that there's a market, now you have to tell other people, make them believe it as well. And that's kind of one of the first things that we did.
I don't know about you guys, but the first person I had to sell it to was myself. That's the honest truth, right? I spent, when I first had, it's not a new idea, obviously there was other companies before us about saying, why do NASA missions cost so much to go do this? Could we build them cheaper? What launches could we be on? That's all great to say at a high level. But there was a good 2 to 3 weeks of actually just doing math every night to say what's a basic first order transfer to a near Earth asteroid? Could I use a TLI launch? Is there enough delta V? How big would my spacecraft need to be? And just understand from an order of magnitude perspective, am I correct? So forget everybody else. Before you start a company, you gotta make sure you're right. And I think this is where being technical as a founder makes all the difference. you have to do the math. And if you don't do the math, like, it's not even worth trying. You got to know the numbers like on the back of your hand to be able to do any of this. I don't care what you are building, you better be crystal clear about why that idea has any salt. And also, what has changed to people before you that it didn't work before, nobody else has tried it. We all like to pretend like big companies are stupid and slow and all these guys are ancient, and that's like not the case at all. A lot of times they don't start these companies because the ideas are high risk, and you better have an inflection point that made your idea different. Once you can articulate that, then you can go talk to investors and other customers and anybody else to go sell the idea to. And that's a pretty basic way to go get intros and talk to them and have a whole bunch of conversations. I think we all did this at some point as we went on, but the first person is you.
I totally agree. You have to do the math first. It's also the first thing we did is we said, okay, how much would it cost to build this system, to fly it? How much would we get paid to be able to do it? Are we going to make money like that? Are we going to make enough money like that to justify venture capital funding? I didn't understand that last piece at the time. Got lucky. It's really essential to know that you're building something that's going to be worth building. And then I think actually in the very early stages, you almost have to be careful about asking other people for too much advice. If you just ask for advice and operate off of that, then you're going to make a very consensus-driven decision. And fundamentally, all of us, by starting startups, are making non-consensus sort of plays here. We're making a bet that is different than the bet of the industry, and we have to be right on it.
You got to have conviction, right? Because you're going to hear people saying that you're wrong or it's not going to work. But like once you've done the math, once you've run the numbers, which you've got to do both of those things for the economics and the technology, you got to have conviction. You got to stick to it to be persistent.
Yes, and then the same thing is going to be true when you go out and start talking to people. When we went out, we finally got money. We got $500,000, which was like infinite money in my head at the time. And we said, we're going to hire people. And I had a list of like, here's the 30 people that I want to hire. And I went to all of them. And they were all like, I don't know, man. You're telling me I'm going to take a pay cut and the company's probably going to go under and I'm going to have to work really hard? Why would I want this job? What kind of job is this? You just have to ask enough people until you find somebody that is, it turns out, in that right sort of mindset where they go, actually, I'm just really hungry to do something that makes a difference, and I don't care if I make basically no money for a year doing something crazy. That sounds amazing to me right now. And it turns out those people actually totally exist.
Yeah.
And the same will happen when you go talk to investors. You'll try to talk to like Seattle area angel investors, and they'll say, I invest in B2B SaaS startups from founders that just left Amazon or Microsoft, and they're going to sell their company to Amazon or Microsoft. They directly told us this. And they're never going to invest in a crazy space company, and they in fact think you're an idiot. But those aren't the people that you need. You just need one of the other people to invest in your company, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, so I want to build on a theme that Matt actually brought up about the big incumbents, right? So sometimes it's easy for someone on the outside to consider these big aerospace and defense incumbents just kind of sitting around and waiting to be disrupted. But having been worked at a big prime, and I was responsible for growing and protecting our business, and had a lot of really talented people and resources to do that. So like, how do you, as a new company, compete with these really formidable competitors who the deck is stacked against you?
I think that having competitors is a good thing. It means that you're a little less crazy. It means that somebody else sees the power and potential of what you do. For folks who aren't familiar with our business, our satellite called the Otter does, say, life extension, space debris removal. Northrop Grumman began a mission like that in 2019. They're successful in it. It's really amazing on their part. Astroscale has raised like $500 million to try to tackle this. Sometimes with a small team and sort of the fundamentals of your business, they just sit like right at the front of your head every day, all day. We sit and do the math and go like, okay, well, for this business case to close, I can only pay this much for launch, so my satellite has to have this mass. And you see and then I have to do it in this certain time because otherwise we run out of money. You see these constraints right in your head. Like, I think that just by having those constraints so visible, it gives you the right incentives to be able to move in a way that just doesn't quite exist at a prime. And so, like, even though we have competitors out there who have raised a lot of capital to go after our vision. One of our problems right now is that our competitors are not doing well enough, and it has caused our customers to be skeptical of some of the things going on in the industry.
Yeah, sometimes it helps if your competitors are doing great because then you're lumped in with that success.
Yeah, for us, I think about our competitors. There are some space competitors, but there's also non-space, since we're software, mostly, well, only software. But I think for me, it's you have to offer something slightly different. Even if people think it's the same, you have to offer a different service. You have to offer, a higher level of reliability and mission services for your customers, so that they're going to get something way better for a lot less money than they will with a large prime customer. And so I think that's the main thing that has to set us aside, is that we offer better software at a better price point to service the industry that we want. And that's, it's hard to do that, because as a small company, we're all working crazy hours to be able to deliver that, but we're all passionate about what we're doing. And that, like Austin was saying, you have to convince people that they are going to work for less money, and they're going to work harder, and ultimately it's going to be worth it. But I think that's one of the major things that we have that's different.
I think us as founders love to all pretend that we're special, and we're not. Like, what I'll say here is very, very basic. There's this famous guy named Charlie Munger that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. He wrote a book called Charlie Munger's Almanac, and if you're thinking about starting a company, go read it. It's not titled How to Start a Space Company or How to Start a Cardboard Box Company. It's titled How Do You Make a Company? And the key thing in there is that incentive alignment matters a lot. And so when I say I want to go upend what JPL is building in these mega class missions, or what Maxar is doing when they go out to the cosmos, what I'm actually saying is I just want my incentives to be different. I don't want my incentives to be to go win the next giant $4 billion government contract that works in 37 districts and across 20 states. I'm actually saying my incentive is I want to be a mining company. I want to be a commercial space company. I truly want to be one of the first commercial space companies. And in order to do that, my incentives are completely different. I can't build a $4 billion mission, because guess what? The math doesn't math if you spend $4 billion to go to an asteroid and you bring back $60 million worth of material. Like, that's a really shitty business. So let's not do that. Let's build a low-cost satellite. And I think all of us up here just have different incentives. Our main incentive is not to leech off the government, and that allows us to act differently. Because we're not a big prime too, it also means that I don't upend one of my other business models, which is leeching off the government, if I go do something different. And I think this is where primes get locked in, and this is where the opportunity is that Boeing is not going to turn around and all of a sudden start making a $5 million GEO bus, because they'll kill their GEO constellations for the government. And that's not how government contracting can work. We're not afraid of that, right? I'm okay if Maxar dies, because I want to be the replacement to them, right? It's a different incentive structure. That's it. It's really simple.
I think at the end of the day, space is a team sport, and every single prime recognizes that. Every single prime, uses the term competitive till they're blue in the face, because they all do work together. Yeah. And as a startup, whether you're doing something really bleeding edge, or you're doing something that's more evolutionary, finding where you can team with primes is one of the most important things I think you can do in terms of go-to-market and expanding your business. Because they, as kind of to your core question, Joe, like they exist, they're venerated and venerable in specific areas and specific verticals that will continue, and we can say, hey, maybe that could be more efficient. And there are folks at those primes who also say that same thing, and they have customers that say that same thing too. And so, aligning incentives with those folks and saying, hey, we can help each other here, and we can deliver more value for the customers you care about, or you can help me do this new and awesome thing. That's the way that I've historically approached working with primes, and I think from a startup perspective, that's the way that you're going to be most successful. Because if you just go and say, hey, I'm going to go replace, Sybers, the Sybers system. Like, I guarantee you a prime's going to have a couple of comments about that.
The reaction you want to.
Right, right. But if you say, hey, like we can go do this cool new space domain awareness thing together because I have this widget and you have this customer relationship and this, this bus or whatever, and that together opens up more, puts another wedge in the pie, everybody's happy about that.
So does that mean that you guys have a little bit different perspectives there, where Andrew, you would want to work with primes? Matt, how would you feel about working with primes on your mission?
I do have a different perspective. My end goal, look, I'm just building a different type of company, right, which is to supply power for other satellites. You have a customer there. My customers are commodities. Like, we all know how much these materials are worth. So for me, you have a very different view, which is I'm just not interested. I don't think it's worth my time as going through there. And again, it comes down to just different incentive alignment. But I also want to point out one thing that I think is really important, is that we're all not going to sit up here, as we talked about, have a uniform opinion on every single one of these topics.
Sure.
Pretty important. We all have different theses.
Very different businesses.
And we could all be right or all be wrong. I guess time will tell, right? I'm sure some of us aren't going to be up here in a couple of years. We're going to be maybe working for the other guys on the panel. Like, that's what's the beauty about startups. We all don't come from the same place. We all don't have the same ideas, and we get to test our theories as we go into the future. Right. For me, it is independent thought. I want to be alone. I want to make the cheapest, low-cost, deep space spacecraft I can, because that gives me the best marginal return on the core metal commodity I need to build. Teaming up with a prime does nothing for me except to make it cost more and add a cog in the wheel that I don't want to exist.
So I think if you're thinking about starting a company, one of the things that's really fundamental in starting a company is knowing why you want to start the company. And it turns out there's a bunch of really valid reasons for that. You could be like, I want to get rich. You could want to be your own boss. You could want to try to bring a product into the market. You could just want to have a big impact on the space industry. All of those are going to lead to different decisions for you. I think there's a lot of businesses where the decision of, I want to have the primes be a customer for me and I want to support them as they do large missions, can be a really great way for operate your business. I think for other businesses, and sometimes ours floats into this category, you go, well, if you want to have a big impact on space, there's almost a trap of trying to sell small things to existing customers versus taking on an ambitious vision yourself.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, Austin. That if you found a company based on a broad vision, you have to maintain the courage of that conviction. And if you don't, you should be honest about it and change the vision. Because yeah, if you can sell a better star tracker to Lockheed and build a $10 million business, and then sell that business one day to someone else.
Rocket Lab.
And it's a great business.
Right.
Great business. It's
right,
amazing.
right. And there's really awesome engineering, there are really awesome challenges there. You also have the startup life of getting smacked in the head and, at breakfast and getting your hand shook at lunch and getting smacked in the head at dinner and then doing that again the next day still. And that will have a different kind of return profile versus if you say, hey, like we want to change the fundamentals of space operations through in-space servicing, or we want to change our relationship with the cosmos through in-space mining, or what have you. Those are different things. But I think staying committed to that I think as a founder is an important part of my job, is an important part of like my leadership for the company. But then ultimately saying, but also like recognizing, hey, when we adjust, if we do adjust that ambition, we have to call that spade a spade and do so.
Yeah, I think I will push back a little bit, though, because entrepreneurs take a lot of risk.
Sure.
So there are certain businesses that aren't worth that risk. I think that this is how venture capitalists look. They have to invest, they're investing in very early stage companies, and a founder is even earlier than a venture capitalist, right? And you only have one in your portfolio. Unlike an investor, they get to have a portfolio of risky bets. An entrepreneur just has one, right? All your eggs in one basket. So the return has to be commensurate with the risk that you're taking. So how do you think about that? I mean, I think there's you need to have an opportunity to have a big outcome. And I think the companies we have up here are reflective of that type of thinking, right? We're not building a company that's going to be a $1 million revenue a year business. It's not at least these types of companies.
But I think that actually goes to what Austin was saying. It's like you have to understand the why when you're founding a company, because the why can be, hey, I'm a great engineer and I make a better star tracker, and the prime I work at doesn't think that this is interesting enough to build something around, so I'm going to go across the street and build it and then sell it, and that's going to create a great outcome for my family.
Yeah.
There are other areas, and you can also be motivated by making a huge impact, by making a permanent change in how humans use space and interact with space. I mean, that's way more close to home for me. I got pay off my law school debt money from Made in Space. That was great. That was good. Not super motivated by a huge financial outcome, though. Again, that's not a bad thing. But it's more the hey, we did this thing and nobody ever did this before, and it's this permanent change, and that's something that my kids can be inspired by and appreciate. That's my why, and it's not necessarily hey, I want to make $100 billion public companies, but that also is part of the ambition.
I think for most space founders that I've talked to, Matt being the one that is contradictory, but most space founders, the mission is the first thing that they care about, and then the money comes later. I think you heard that, Andrew. I don't know about you. I haven't asked you about this on Austin, but for me, it's about the mission. It's about changing how we operate in space. It's about changing, what people do on the ground to communicate with their spacecraft, and how we respond to anomalies. It's changing the face of how that looks, and then hopefully the second part comes later. But really nailing that mission, nailing the customer problem is first and foremost, and then the outcome is coming, hopefully.
To me, so many people get this wrong, and I absolutely hate it, is to your Star Tracker analogy. Don't waste your fucking time. If you're going to go build a company that wants to build a Star Tracker, that's fine. Don't go get venture funding for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not a venture outcome. Yeah. And I see this all the time in space about people saying, I want to go do X. And you're like, cool. If you are successful, what is the market today that, and I've started asking this question actually differently. I say, what was the market worth last year? And if the answer is 0, I'm not interested in talking to you anymore. There has to be a business case for why you want to go do this. It actually comes down to something, Joe, that I think will resonate with you, is that Planetary Resources had the idea of in-space fueling, right? Of going out mining asteroids for water and then turning that into rocket fuel and refueling rockets. Yeah. The reason I'm not going after that is because there are no refuelable rockets.
The market for that last year was 0.
Right? The market for that last year was 0. And this is why we want to go after metal commodities, specifically the platinum group metals, because it's a quantifiable market I can go after. But what I will say as a founder too, the other way that I think a little differently here is to your point, and I hadn't heard this word until I started hanging out with venture capitalists. We love to say our thesis, right? My thesis for Astroforge is to go mine asteroids. If for some reason that changes, and let's say we're all talking about Golden Dome. I don't even know what Golden Dome is. I don't know if anybody knows what Golden Dome is, right? But let's say that we get a $10 billion Golden Dome contract tomorrow. That's fine. But actually my thesis as a founder will change. I have 0 interest in building low Earth orbiting spacecraft. And so what I'll say there is I'm actually perfectly fine to say cool, if that's what the company does and there is a massive market there and we hit it, I won't be CEO of that company. And I think that's also perfectly reasonable for us to all think too. If we're no longer interested or our ideas change or we become a B2B SaaS company,
Hey.
we can take a step back as CEO and say this is not my dream, because while capital is a big part of that, and look, we'd all love to, I'd rather be rich than not rich. I'm also not founding a company to play the game of founding a company. It's actually just what I want to go do. And so time matters a lot. And if at some point I can no longer have a vision to go explore the universe and go figure out what's out there, I'm going to go do something else with my time where I have a chance to go do that. And that may or may not align with the business long term.
Yeah.
I do think we have a real bias by having 4 people that have all raised actually pretty significant amounts of venture capital up here. Most businesses don't raise venture capital. You can build great businesses. My wife has a friend who renovates kitchens and decks, and she has her business, and there's 3 of them. It's really interesting. She actually thinks about a lot of the same questions I think about. Can we hire another person? How do we go out and get customers? How do we make sure our cash flow works? There's a bunch of different ways to start businesses. We happen to have started venture-backed ones, and you do it just because that's well aligned with you, and some other businesses aren't as risky as the businesses that we start. I also think sometimes there's a difference between what's the risk for the business and what's the risk for you as a founder in starting the business. The worst case scenario for me in starting Starfish Space, I'd done the math, I had enough money that I could survive for a year. I said, what if the market drops by a third? And then it did, because it was right before COVID that I started the company. And the worst case scenario, as I thought about it, was that I and a close friend who I knew I worked well with would work really hard for 12 months on a really interesting idea. We'd learn a bunch, we'd meet a bunch of people, we wouldn't make any money for it. And like 10 years in the future, we would always look back and say, well, we were better off for doing that. We learned so much. We learned way more than what we would have learned if we'd have done just the same job for the same year.
Yeah.
And so even though it's like really risky for our company, I don't think it was risky for me individually.
Mm-hmm. So I want to double click on this government as a customer question as well. I think it ties into some of the questions here that from the audience about raising VC money versus non-dilutive funding. So I think one of the things you were talking about, Matt, is like signal, like from customers. Like what was the market last year? What is the market this year? Is there signal from customers? In this industry, maybe uniquely, we can get signal from customers. We can go win a phase 1 SBIR for something that had a market of 0 last year. Is that good or bad? Like, is that what are maybe the risks of approaching?
I guess, look, I hate this idea of non-dilutive funding. That's just not true. It's very time dilutive. In fact, it shifts your whole company. And if you ever go to companies that only win government contracts, they're actually ran very different than a customer-facing company. This is why it was really critical. I got kind of laughed at by everybody when I joined Bird Scooters, but it was really important to me to join Bird Scooters. They, at the time I joined, were the fastest growing company in the world. And I wanted to understand what a company looked like when it did nothing with the government. In fact, we worked with China, right? Like we made the scooters in China. I wanted to see how fast you can go, and holy shit, it was a completely different way to think about the world. I mean, at Bird, we went from literally a meeting with the CEO saying we need to make the next iteration of the scooter to making 100,000 scooters in 8 months. Yeah, they're still stupid scooters, and we'd all make fun of it, like, wow, we built 100,000 scooters, like, way to pollute the earth. But like, saw a way to advance much faster that wasn't government-based. And so to me, it's actually not the fair trade. It's time is a variable in there that we lose accounting for. And also, the government may pay you. The government is not a customer. A customer to me is someone that will be recurring and will pay you at multiple times to do the same thing. The government on most of these is going to be a one-off. Right? They're going to be a one-off spot buy of like, we'd love to have you do this demonstration mission. That still can help. That's not something I'm going to say you don't want to go after. I'm sure to all extent, we all use it to some extent to bolster our business. I think it's important that the end goal is not to just leech off the government.
It's like a theme with you.
Yep.
No leeching off the government.
No leeching off the government. That's the rule. If you want to do that, just go work at Boeing.
We're helping the government. We're not leeching off them.
Well, I think for the SBIRs, I agree with what Matt said. It is time. It's like 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, and here's this demonstration, and then you have to write a big long proposal for 1.5 million of non-dilutive funding, but it's not non-dilutive. You have to have multiple people working on it, and it might not directly apply to your exact mission, so you have to do that risk.
Lucky if it directly applies.
You're lucky if it is directly applicable to your mission. You might be going after the money so that you can direct some of it towards your mission and some of it towards the government's mission. And so you have to really do that risk trade to understand, is it worth the time to apply for this government non-dilutive funding, or should I just, be a little bit more fiscally responsible for the next 6 months?
Or just go after different types of funding. So I think some people may think that, a venture capitalist comes in and looks at a space company if they don't have a government contract. In your experience, is that a factor, or is it a positive or negative? Do venture folks
most people that I talk to actually don't look at SBIRs as contracts, or any like phase 1, phase 2. They don't look at that as contracts or funding. So they basically negate any money that you have received through those, and they look at just customers, at least who I've talked to.
I think they definitely value them less than they would another customer. I don't think they end up being 0, but I think they are valued less. I'll also say, we have quite a bit of money from the government, a good chunk of which came through the SBIR program. Now we're focused more on doing on-orbit missions. Our philosophy the whole time has been, we're doing this if it is directly on path to where we go over the long term. There's a lot of times where the NASA SBIR solicitation came out, and we said we're not applying to any of these because they're not directly relevant to the technologies that we need to build. I think this is something that it's not even close enough for us, where it's like, this is the thing we want to build, or it's not. That's one of the things I think the Air Force has done really well. They have the open topic SBIR program where you can propose what you want to build, and then it does a better job of aligning your incentives. And so we have a mission that we're doing for the Space Force right now that's set to launch next year. That contract, it's a public number, it's like $37.5 million that we're getting paid by the Space Force to do this. That started as a $50,000 SBIR, where we proposed that through an open topic. And it wasn't really the $50,000 that was valuable, but the people that it allowed us to get in contact with and the way it allowed us to show off our work for them turned out to be really valuable. I think that was, again, because we had the mindset, it's not like this is important revenue for our business. It's about what it leads us to over the long term. Does this align with what we want?
I learned about these open topic SBIRs recently, and actually the job that you get hired to do is actually to find customers for your specific thing within the government. So really, I think
it's great, and you'll hear a lot of people talking now like, oh, $50,000 doesn't do anything. Why do you even have the phase one? You should just do direct to phase two. But the thing is, it's not really about the money. It's not about, look at all this money I make from SBIRs. It's about getting your foot in the door, getting the long-term relationships with the customers. That's great.
The programs that we're talking about here are important because they are customer signal and they are customer relationship establishing. If you are selling into the satellite manufacturing, satellite operating, satellite use and services markets, because the U.S. government is the single largest buyer of those things. And if you don't have that as part of your go-to-market strategy, then you're excluding a significant portion of potential return. I mean, the 50 grand, the 75 grand, whatever you get, the $1.5 million you get for phase two is not really meaningful money in the world that we live in now, where there is a vibrant deep tech and space tech investment community. Like when we were in the past, that wasn't the case. Like in the past, that was the only game, was grow by your customer. And I think you should, now you have the opportunity to not be exclusively focused on government contracts and growing with your customers and growing by your customers there. But I would counsel people not to totally eschew those if your ultimate goal is to provide services to the space market as it stands today. If you're going to go to space and create value there and sell that into different markets, you have an opportunity to just totally sidestep these kind of programs, which is cool. But for us, and I think maybe to rephrase what Austin said, the 50 grand doesn't matter. It's aligning the incentive with the government customer and speaking to them how they like to be spoken to, and they like to be spoken to in the context of a contract that you're performing on.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about things that went well. And I'd love to hear some stories about things that just worked really well. Like, in our industry, a lot of things take a long time. Like, tell me a story about something that where you're able to just go super fast and get something done fast.
I think something that has surprised me is if you just set what feels like very reasonable goals and then you just achieve them, it's amazing. And you feel like, well, shouldn't I set incredibly ambitious goals that are going to be really hard to achieve? How am I ever going to achieve them? And in aggregate, your simple to achieve goals, if you're starting a venture-backed startup, should lead to something that's kind of amazing in the end. But it's easy to get caught up and just change your goals every day and never really work towards them. And in our very first contracts that we had with people both on the commercial side and government side, we said, here's what we're going to do over 4 months. Here's where we're going to be every month along the way. And then we met with them every month along the way, and we just did the things that we were going to do. And at the end, they're like, you guys are so good at this job. We just did the things we said we were going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, especially in our sector that likes to have schedules slip. Like that just saying, hey, here's my schedule, gonna hit it, it's got this amount of margin in it, so I have that, then I can deliver for you. Like that's really satisfactory. Yeah.
I think for me, it's, we build software, so everybody thinks software's easy. And I'll be the first one to tell you it's not easy. It is very complicated. So when somebody says, hey, can you just put a graph here and that does this, this, and this, those things are actually really complex.
Just use AI?
Yeah, AI. AI solves every problem we've got. Let me talk to you about AI one day. My microphone stopped working, sorry. But I guess one thing I would say is, customers will come to us and they'll say, oh, if you could only add this, this, and this. And our team is really reactive to what our customers ask for and say. And, we will often have somebody come to us and the next week, be it, it's not easy, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to do this. The next week, we'll put out something new and the customers will come back and say, wow, that was a really cool change you made. And I really appreciated that. And it just makes you feel really good, like, hey, I'm actually solving a problem for somebody. I'm doing something that helps their business, and that makes me feel really good.
I don't know about you. I've actually never, this might just be my personality, like, I never celebrate anything that goes well because I don't think anything ever goes well. And I think my mind doesn't focus on it because how are you going to fix things that go well? Like, our job as founders is to fix things that are broken at our company.
You guys rebuilt a satellite in 10 months or something.
Yeah, and the reason we did that is because we fucked up at trying to buy it, right?
Yeah, but everybody's gonna make mistakes. I was amazed to hear how fast you guys built this satellite and got it ready for launch.
It didn't work.
You got it on the
always
launch
gonna be-
vehicle. There's a lot of amazing things you did. You didn't come out of it and go look at us, we kicked some butt there.
Sure, and I think, look, there always is some credit to say, yeah, we worked really hard as a team 24/7 to build what was going to be an interplanetary spacecraft in 8.5 months and then ship it to the Cape. And the fact SpaceX let us on the rocket, I think, is actually the biggest sign of
yes, that's really hard to do.
Okay, you're not going to kill everybody else on here. At least we're getting past that, right? That's
Yeah.
a Herculean effort to get to. What I've actually always looked back on this is the reason we got into that situation was because our thesis, to your word there, Joe, at the beginning was that we were going to buy spacecraft. Right? There's a whole bunch of people making satellite buses. Why do I need to do this? I'm going to purchase them. And what we realized is oh no, I forgot about that little book that my buddy Charlie Munger wrote of align incentives. I'm not aligning incentives when I go buy a spacecraft, right? Their incentive is to sell me a spacecraft and get paid, and mine is that it works. Because they're actually out of whack. And I think this is a big problem with bus providers as a whole. And so when we got that, and I was I'm not flying this thing, and we had to recover. Yeah, we did a lot in 8.5 months. And we did launch the first commercial mission to deep space, and I think we got the farthest out of any commercial mission to deep space ever. I mean, the last communication we had with the spacecraft was about 850,000 kilometers away from the Earth, which is pretty fucking far.
That's
celebrate
incredible.
that.
That's incredible.
To me, we can, sure we could, but instead I would rather celebrate,
success.
why didn't we make it 2 million, right? That's the IA limit. And so how do we get there? And so everything to me is always focused on being better. And I don't know if you guys read my boring ass blog posts. I don't recommend you do, but we spell this out in detail, all the things we got wrong and how we fix it so that everybody can learn how to get better at building spacecraft, not just us. If we end up being the company that isn't successful, I hope that we can at least push the next wave to learn how to be successful.
I do think it's really tricky as a founder. You have to worry about all the problems. You have to worry about all the things where it's not going well. If things are going well, then somebody on your team has done a great job and you say good job and you don't need to worry about it. It's where the things aren't going well that you need to step in. And we're trying to do something really ambitious. And so the odds of us failing both on small scales and on large scales are really high. That is way more exhausting than mathematically it should be. You can know the math and you can know the expected value. You can say, I'm going to talk to 100 investors, 99 will say no, 1 will lead our round, and it'll be great. And that is true, and then you lead the fundraising round, and it is a horrible experience personally to go through that process.
I love it. You guys all, I get this all the time, everybody hates fundraising.
Actually,
You like fundraising?
I don't hate it.
It's kind of fun.
What's wrong with
think
you
it-
guys? That's insane.
Fundraising is a
story over
poker
and over
game.
again.
I don't even like that. I love the gambling aspect
We
of
like
it.
the punishment.
Yeah, you're it's
Oh.
like a poker game with $1 million chips, and you got to bluff, right? Hopefully nobody calls.
I'm not bluffing.
Satellites.
I'm building something awesome. I'm not bluffing.
Great. Right, so
You're not getting the highest valuation, Andrew. So
we've got just
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
We've got
Not
just a couple
bluffing, you're not
minutes
going
left,
hard
and I want to do two quick answer questions at the end. One is from the audience, which is a question I love. We all hear about how difficult it is to found startups, but what is one thing you found was easier than expected?
It's really easy to find a startup. You just file the paperwork. You've done it. You've started.
That's a great one. You can have a Delaware corporation in a day.
Yeah. I found it easier if you just did the things you said you were going to do. It was easier to impress people than what you thought.
Yeah.
Ooh, easier? I don't know, come back to me.
Okay.
I actually think it was, what was easier? What I always heard was really hard with companies was telling a story and getting the story locked into what you actually wanted to do and how you did it. And not saying it was super easy, but I actually thought that turned out to be much cleaner and faster than I thought and how long it would take me. So I'd say storytelling.
I think one thing that's easier in startup land than people think is talking to the absolute top echelons of your customers.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
You can actually just schedule a meeting.
right. Like, and especially as like co-founder, CEO, like having the mentality that like I'm a CEO, that person's a CEO. I'm talking top to top.
Let's talk.
Like he may have he may be a NASA administrator, he may have $25 billion budget, or he may run, $10 billion arm of a prime or whatever, but like, we're the same. Like that kind of view and then just going, like that turns out to be easier than you think.
Totally.
I think for me, it's easier to redirect people. If you see somebody doing something that is not building the company, you can redirect them. At bigger companies, you have to go through processes and tell them and tell their manager's manager. And this way, you just go directly to the person and you say, "Hey, I don't think this is going to help us build the business." And they go, "Okay, thank you very much. I'll make a change."
Great. All right. Thank you all so much for this conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it. Let's give a round of applause for the founders here on the stage.
Thanks for running it, Joe.
Cool. Thanks.